Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ed McMahon, and I am the CEO of Epic Engineered Technologies, and I'd like to welcome you to our webinar today titled Managing Suppliers for Military and Aerospace Applications. For those of us who operate in the aerospace and military markets, we know how critical it is to have all of our systems and processes documented and updated regularly. Just this week, the Defense Contract Management Agency and the Government and Industry Data Exchange have placed stop shipments on several different military connectors manufactured by large, experienced mil-spec suppliers due to not following specific protocols. So this webinar is very timely indeed. Epic has been in the electronics business for over 64 years, and we've been involved with programs as wide-reaching as the first Apollo space missions to today's highest tech gear such as IED jamming devices and aerospace interface systems. Our presenter today is Todd Barham, Epic's Business Development Manager for the Military and Aerospace industries. Todd has been working in the electronics sector of these industries for over 22 years. His career not only includes experience in the design and production of military and aerospace electronics, but Todd has also been very active as the Vice President of the Space Coast chapter of the Surface Mount Technology Association. So with that, I'd like to turn this over to Todd and have him start with his presentation.
Thanks, Ed. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. As Ed mentioned, I'm Todd Barham, and I'm the Military and Aerospace Business Development Manager for Epic Engineered Technology. So why is this information important? Well, many suppliers don't understand all of the requirements of a typical mil-aero customer. We'll discuss some of these requirements and what to look for in a supplier to assure these requirements can be met. We will break today's discussion into 6 areas: paperwork, product end of life, obsolete and counterfeit parts, product repairs, certifications, environmental testing, and compliance. Military and aerospace electronics must perform every time, all the time. To ensure compliance to the design, mil-aero electronics require additional documentation and certification as compared to commercial equivalents. Contract review. This is a documented process to ensure the supplier and customer have an understanding before work commences. This prevents either side from overlooking a critical performance or contractual obligation. This should be a critical step in your supplier's process. First article testing. This ensures the supplier has the capabilities and equipment to produce the products. In addition to the equipment and expertise, the supplier should have a system in place to perform these tests and document the results. Parts verification. Counterfeit parts are a very real threat to the performance of mil-aero electronics. We'll talk more about this later in the presentation, but the supplier should be familiar with the latest inspection techniques and have a mitigation plan in place. Lot numbering and serialization. The lifespan of mil-aero assemblies can be decades in some cases. Typically, these assemblies are tracked by a serial number. A supplier with a robust tracking system can provide data to pinpoint assemblies in need of repair or upgrades. This will minimize impact if an upgrade or rework is needed once these units have been fielded. AS9100. This is a set of standardized requirements for flight hardware. This system is intended to ensure the operators are trained in these techniques. This certification requires some of the documentation systems we have already discussed. A supplier must be audited by a third party to obtain and retain this certification. The resources needed to support these requirements are a significant investment, but critical to ensure your supplier can meet the requirements of producing mil-aero electronics. Continuing on with paperwork, what is Defense Priorities and Allocation Systems? This is a rating system used by the Military Procurement Office to ensure priority for products critical to our nation's defense and security. There are two levels of priority ratings, the DX and DO. DX is for products determined to have the highest national defense urgency. DO-rated products are still critical to national defense, but lesser priority than DX. When a supplier agrees to this rating, they are agreeing all unrated products will be set aside if they are impeding a timely delivery of a DX or DO-rated product. These requirements are intended to be flowed down through the entire supply chain. In extreme cases, the government can seize and take control of your assets to ensure DX and DO products are receiving the highest priority. Now I'd like to talk about product end of life. Due to the long life cycle of these products, component obsolescence is usually encountered. Let's discuss three of the challenges to support these products as the components become obsolete. Being proactive to solve the problem before the supply of components is depleted. Because the supply of components starts to disappear, the price goes up and the counterfeiters try to profit. Being proactive is key. Also, having engineering horsepower in-house to redesign and retest the potential solutions is a significant advantage. Furthermore, being familiar with the product minimizes the time to understand the entire functionality of the product. This allows quicker collaboration between engineering, quality, and the program office when solutions are being evaluated. Third, having well-documented work instructions becomes more critical as the frequency of production often becomes reduced as the product reaches end of life. Well-documented work instructions allow the production process to stop and start quicker. It also maximizes consistency of the product from batch to batch. Counterfeit parts are such a growing concern that establishing a chain of custody is a key element in any counterfeit mitigation strategy. This consists of a paper trail documenting the origin of the components used. This is to ensure only authentic components are used in the assembly of the product. The DoD oversees this function and can punish with fines and/or imprisonment if found guilty. A supplier must show due diligence and a documented strategy to ensure compliance. As you can see from this slide, counterfeit parts can cause many issues. A counterfeit part can cause a failure at the worst possible time, putting a warfighter's life in jeopardy and possibly the whole mission. It can also cause loss of contracts, resulting in negative costs and schedule impacts. Penalties and damage to your corporate image are also possible. This slide shows the risk ladder. The risk ladder is a useful frame of reference for understanding the counterfeit risk hierarchy. This ladder shows, as your source moves further down the ladder, confidence is lost as risk of counterfeit parts entering the population is increased. This increased risk is due to the procurement source becoming further and further away from the production source. This increased number of times the parts change hands creates opportunity for counterfeit parts to enter the population. It also makes documenting the chain of custody more difficult. As you can see from this ladder, procuring direct from the original component manufacturer or original equipment manufacturer provides the most confidence. It's important to look for suppliers that have agreements with major OEMs. The next highest level of confidence comes from authorized or franchise distributors. Suppliers with an open dialogue to their franchise distributors receive the earlier notice we spoke of in previous slides. This additional time is key to being proactive with solutions before all of the authentic supply is exhausted. In extreme cases where parts without a documented chain of custody are being considered, all responsible parties from the program office down to the supplier must agree and have full disclosure. Rigorous testing and inspection are required to validate the parts as authentic. Oftentimes it is required that the testing be performed by an accredited third party to prevent a conflict of interest. Even with a rigorous validation plan, it can be difficult to authenticate the parts. The counterfeiters are beginning to produce clones of the parts in sophisticated factories, not just recycling or relabeling similar parts. This responsibility of ensuring authentic parts should be flowed down through the supply chain. But ultimately, the responsibility is with the top supplier. Product repairs. In many cases, the original manufacturer is best suited to perform these functions. But this has some unique challenges. The supplier could easily have product with various revisions and different levels of functionality all moving through a work cell. This will require separate systems, procedures, and diligence to track the multitude of possible repairs and upgrades moving through this work cell. Also, documenting what procedures and processes and tests were performed is a requirement. Retesting to ensure the repaired or reworked product performs to this specification will also be needed. This ensures they are tracked by individual serial number throughout the life of the product, as we discussed earlier. Not every supplier has the in-house resources to track, document, and retest the returned assemblies. Certifications. I'm sure we are all familiar with most of these certifications. However, having the certificate does not ensure they're being followed. Unfortunately, the liability falls back on the contracting entity and not the faulty subcontractor. It's important to verify your supplier is following the certification as well. Cage codes are a great example. Having a cage code implies they're a military supplier, but does not show any capability. Now I'd like to talk about environmental concerns. Significant high-end test equipment is needed to simulate the environments mil-aero products must endure. This equipment is expensive to buy and also to calibrate. It requires an experienced staff to operate and maintain. A supplier with these resources in-house is preferred, but that isn't always possible. If the testing is outsourced, ensure a documented relationship exists between your supplier and the contracted testing facility. This allows your supplier to exercise some influence on schedule and priority when needed. You'll also want to know how your product is being transported back and forth. Shipping damage from ESD or other hazards is a consideration. Some of the more common tests are listed here. In the bottom right corner, this is a picture of EPIC's Environmental Stress Screening, or ESS, test chamber. It may also be known as a burn-in chamber, accelerated stress testing, HALT, or HOS testing, whatever the name. The idea is the same. Create a test program that allows you to eliminate the infant mortality of your product. This is a very expensive piece of equipment, not only to purchase, but also having the engineering resources to operate and maintain the equipment are significant. Compliance. These requirements will vary from product to product. Listed here are some of the common standards EPIC runs into when building our mil-aero products. For instance, the MIL Standard 3009, Lighting Aircraft Night Vision Imaging Systems. This requires a considerable amount of knowledge regarding IR emissions of your light source. LEDs solve many of these requirements for cockpit lighting, such as power consumption, reduced size and weight, but can produce too much IR noise to be compliant. A supplier with experience will select the proper component. Our expertise has been developed by supplying these and other Mil-Aero customers over many years and programs. If your supplier is already doing business with major companies in your market space, this is a great indicator they have all the items we discussed today. So, we've discussed 6 major requirements of Mil-Aero suppliers and some of the things to look for when selecting them. This concludes my portion of the presentation. I'll review the questions that came in during the webinar to answer a few. While I'm doing that, Ed McMahon has some more information to share. Ed?
Thanks, Todd. Looking forward to some of those questions that you're going to review right now. Just really quickly, thank you all for attending, and I wanted to go over some of the products that we specifically supply into the military and aerospace markets. You know, being involved in electronics for over 64 years, we've got a pretty long history, all the way back to, like I said earlier, the Apollo 11 mission. We had some of the first printed circuit boards, as we were one of the first printed circuit board manufacturers in the U.S. and the leading part of the IPC. But specifically more like today, if you look at our user interface business, we are very heavily ingrained with the U.S. Navy. As a matter of fact, our facility in Largo, Florida is a U.S. Navy hardware certified, flight hardware certified facility, which allows us to manufacture anything that goes into the cockpit for pilots on any of the Navy programs. And it's a very difficult requirement, but one that we have a lot of pride in. If you look at battery packs, we support people like Boeing, like UTC Aerospace and their fire extinguishing systems on aircraft, everything from commercial 787 programs all the way up into military. And then cable assemblies. Our facility in Largo, again, is also AS9100, so we do a lot of very complex wire harnesses there that require a substantial amount of testing, whether it be shock and vibe or some of the things that Todd had spoke about, to be able to pass the test. And it's more than just passing the test on the initial samples. Many of the programs we participate in require that the actual end product go through an ESS chamber as part of the test for production. So we've got a lot of experience in many of these different programs, but that really is just kind of a quick overview of some of the products. Todd, can you move it one more slide? And to support that, as we had talked about, we've got design centers all over the U.S. and in Europe to help our customers meet whatever requirements that they are. We find that engaging with the customers very early in the design process allows us to work with them and get into production smoothly, allows us to make sure that we're being cost effective in the design for manufacturing, and really, you know, we become an extension of our customer, as many of even the big defense and aerospace OEMs don't have the expertise on staff in every discipline to help them design the right thing. So this really helps us take our business to that next level. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Todd to answer a couple of questions.
Thanks, Ed. So I found a couple of questions to answer. Please continue to send those questions in. We'll answer them afterwards if I'm not answering them right now. The first question, with counterfeit parts becoming so difficult to detect, what are the component manufacturers doing to make their parts distinguishable? This is a great question. In the case of microprocessors and other frequently counterfeited parts, the industry is looking into embedding rare earth elements in a specific combination to create a signature or a fingerprint, if you will. These can be scanned, and they are predetermined so that they are almost like a separate serial number that you can't really see. It's embedded inside of the part. This signature will be changed on a frequent basis to create yet one more level of verifying authenticity. The second question is that you spoke of repairs to fielded electronics? Are there certifications for this type of work? The short answer is yes. There are several, actually. For example, IPC 7711 and 7721 address industry-recognized techniques for reworking and repairing electronic circuits. This is a really good example, I think, because this certification is issued at the operator level. Many of the certifications we talked about in the presentation were for the whole organization on a corporate level. So not only do you want to look for corporate level certifications, but also training and certification all the way down to the employee level for soldering, for reworking, repairing, things of those sort that are applicable to your specific product. So again, please continue to send in your questions. I'll answer them individually at a later time. And thanks again. We really appreciate you guys joining us today.